and welcome this evening or onto the recording for anyone that comes along to catch this later. Nervous system safety for lawyers is what we're talking about today, and understanding our nervous system as a lawyer. Now, I know as a lawyer myself, whenever I'm talking about a topic, I start first of all with a definition of what that actually is. Maybe it's being a real estate lawyer, I'm used to the leases, I'm used to checking the definitions first. So whatever topic I'm talking to people about, I always like to start with the basics of, so what is it that we're actually talking about? So don't worry, if you're thinking, this sounded interesting, but I don't really even know what nervous system safety means or is, or what this has got to do with lawyers, don't worry, we're going to define those things. We're going to have a look at what they mean as well. And why I think this is so important. And I've been saying this for a few years now, having spent almost, in July, 10 years talking about stress, burnout, mental health, well-being, sustainability within law. The nervous system for me was really a missing piece of the puzzle. I feel like looking back, I was doing half a job. I was talking about half a scenario. I was talking about the paracetamol for the headache, which helps, but doesn't get to the root cause of what the headache is. So you're always going to be taking the paracetamol. And at some point, the paracetamol is not going to be strong enough and it's not going to work. And I could go on with that analogy. The nervous system piece, not only for me in my own life, was missing. And it's missing with so many different, whether it's individual lawyers, whether it's teams working together, whether it's firms and businesses. And it's not an exaggeration to say that learning about this is like learning another language. Once you start to understand your own nervous system and to know what to look for in other people's nervous system, you're reading them and understanding them in an entirely different way. So there's lots of research that says at least 70% of our communication is through our body language. And knowing this nervous system piece is like body language plus, if you like, because not only can we read what people are saying and what they're not saying, but we can start to maybe have an idea of the reasons behind some of that behavior. So you can use this knowledge, if you like, or this new language that I hope you're going to see we're talking about today in so many different scenarios. So I will use this in all of my work now. I will use it with the few property clients that I still have. I'll use it with my own team that I manage and mentor. But similarly, I'm using it just as much with a team of partners that I might be training on sexual harassment prevention. That's a tricky topic to bring up with very senior and more traditional type partners, as you might imagine. I can use this with clients who come for business development support. They want more clients, but they're too nervous to even open up LinkedIn, for example, or to put any posts out or to write any articles. Or similarly, I'm using it with my ADHD children at high school and going through all the challenges that they are. And even with the teachers when I have to have those difficult conversations. So I hope I've sort of given you a tiny little snippet of just how powerful this new language, if you like, is, not only for yourself, and that's where I want you to start with your own nervous system, that's where we have to start, but that once we start working on this for ourselves, it's the ability to use this in our everyday life and work that I think you'll find really interesting and hopefully really powerful. So sustainable performance starts with us feeling safe enough, our nervous systems feeling safe enough to function well. And you might think, well, yes, I feel safe at work, Hannah. I talk a lot about psychological safety. I know the SRA is interested in it now as well, which is fantastic. Psychological safety, do we work in teams and environments where we feel that we can be ourselves at work, where we can raise our hand if we think there's a mistake or an issue, and we feel safe enough to speak up? That's, if you like, the traditional definition that's used around psychological safety in the workplace. But does our body, does our nervous system feel safe and supported in that environment? And you'll see what I mean by that as I go on to explain it more. But if our body and brain, it doesn't feel safe, we're not going to be doing our best work because we're going to be in panic mode all the time. And that's what we're going to talk about, how this may be happening for, I'm going to stick my neck out on line and say the majority of lawyers. This is happening for and has been happening for a very long time. So we can't perform well or long-term, sustainably, from a nervous system that feels panicked and feels under threat all the time. So that's the basis of where we're coming from today. So defining nervous system safety, what do I mean by this? So we have our internal threat detection within our body. You're probably very familiar with the idea of the fight or flight response. The body is constantly, or the brain is constantly asking, am I safe? Is there a threat here? Do I need to take steps to protect myself? Now, as I say, I hope that everyone works in a quote unquote safe environment. That's why we're doing all the sexual harassment prevention and harassment prevention training. I do hope that most people, the majority maybe, are in environments which, yes, are physically safe. But the question is, does the brain feel safe? And that's not just related to the environment. That relates to lots of different things that the brain is scanning for constantly. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Because just to put it in very simple terms, and I can talk about the fight or flight response and the brain for ages, but I won't. I'll just give us a snippet to work from. In simple terms, the fight or flight response was created so that humans would survive. So the brain's whole purpose was just to keep us alive. So you go back to early humans, and believe it or not, our brains have not changed all that much since then. Early humans were constantly scanning. Can I walk down that path? Is that safe? Can I eat that berry? Is that safe? Can I go near that tribe, or are they going to attack me? Etc., etc. The brain was constantly scanning for threats to make sure that it protected the human and that the human survived, and therefore the human race survived. And the brain is still doing that. It is constantly scanning for threats. Am I safe here, or am I not safe here? Now, what we're talking about here is not the physical safety. We're talking about whether the brain thinks, is it okay for me to take a day off and not check my emails? Or is that unsafe? Because if I don't check my emails and there's something in there that's a problem, then I'm not going to know about it. It's going to escalate. It's going to become some sort of disaster. I'll lose the client. There'll be a complaint against me. I'll lose all my clients. I'll lose all my work. I'll lose my job. I'll never get another one again. I'll lose my house. I'll be on the streets, and then I'll die. That's the sort of safety I'm talking about. So for some people, it's not being able to go a day without checking their emails. For other people, it might be saying yes to every single request for whether they have capacity. Because if they say no, then maybe they will never be given any more work again. And then they won't have enough work, and then they won't be billing enough, and then they might lose their job, and then they might never get another job again, and then they'll lose their house, be on the streets, and die. It sounds dramatic, but this is the process that our brains are going through all the time. That's why you feel that stress response when certain things happen. So I've said it for years. For me, 10, 11 years ago, it was an email or a phone message that said, Hannah, contact me urgently. If I saw that in my head right away, I'd made a mistake. I would lose everything. That was how quickly it was then happening, because it gets faster the more the brain gets used to it. So these are the sorts of threats that our bodies and our brains are scanning for all the time. But conversely, what does a safe nervous system look like? It means the body and the brain isn't constantly trying to live in survival mode. It's not constantly scanning for, am I doing enough? I can't possibly stop and rest because I might miss something. There might be an issue. I might not be on top of it. People might need me for something. And if I'm not there for them, they'll never ask me again. And you can see how this applies in personal life and home life. So what we mean by safety is that the brain and the body can relax sometimes. It doesn't mean there's no stress. It doesn't mean we don't experience that fight or flight, that increase in stress levels for a period of time. We're going to talk about that a little bit more because we need that. It's a natural part of the stress system, but we're not meant to live in it. And many of us, and this is why we're looking at so much chronic stress, burnout, people leaving the profession, all of those sorts of things, arguably a much larger incidence of complaints and claims and all this sort of thing, because we're living constantly in this survival and threat mode. The body and the brain is not stepping down out of that stress mode. Whereas when it's safe, we're able to take some steps to recover That might be seconds, it might be a minute, it might be 5 minutes, half an hour, to regulate that nervous system. And a regulated nervous system means that it can go up into the stress response because it needs to, for a 4 o'clock deadline or a particularly tricky client conversation or a near miss crossing the road. You know, there are reasons we have the stress response, and that's healthy, but we're meant to go into the stress response, deal with the issue, and then come out of the stress response. And that's a regulated system. We use the stress hormones for the firefighting emergency that we need to, and then we come back out of it again. So that's the difference between a sort of high alert, under threat nervous system and a more safe nervous system. It does not mean that it does not feel pressure, does not mean it does not feel stress. It means that it can go into those systems for a short period of time, do what it needs to do, and then come back into the rest and relax and restore type mode, if you like. So I'm going to seed throughout this some specific examples of traits and behaviours that you would see commonly in the legal profession. I've already hinted at one or two around checking emails, being contactable, managing our capacity, that sort of thing. But I've said here, protection often looks like feelings of anxiety, feelings of strong perfectionism, or perhaps irritability with other people. It can look like many other things. But where we feel those feelings of anxiety, the brain is potentially saying, hang on, are you scanning for enough threats? If you're not feeling stressed enough, I'm going to bump up your stress level so that you are even more so scanning the horizons for threats. Are you missing something? Are you missing an email that you were supposed to respond to? A document you were supposed to file? For me, this always happened at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I would wake up and I would run through every single file until I'd found something that I had forgotten to do or possibly got wrong. I would be up doing that. And I've known people who are in really, really high stress levels have to get up and physically look through either their phone, their emails, or their files, etc. Can look like perfectionism. So perfectionism, yes, it may have been a trait we talked about in job interviews many years ago, but it is a threat response. It is the idea that if I just keep doing it again, and if I do it again, and if I do it again, then hopefully I won't get it wrong, I won't let anyone down, I won't lose my job, etc., etc. And irritability when we're just too tired to keep trying to be polite anymore. Because as you can imagine, high anxiety, perfectionism, overdoing things, overworking, because we can't let go of anything, we have to keep redoing it all the time, results in a lot of tiredness. Not just physical tiredness, but brain tiredness, cognitive tiredness. So a safe nervous system is the ability to be able to, as I say, come back into balance. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about with our nervous system, and how we're talking about what a healthy and regulated nervous system looks like versus one that is out of balance. Which, if you do feel like any of this is you, you are absolutely not alone. I've worked with thousands and thousands of lawyers over the last 10 years. And I would probably say that the vast majority, I'd even go as far as 90 or 95% of them, are in that high alert state. Even the students, even the trainees, the paralegals, all of them. It's almost a natural state that we have come to expect in the profession. And we may talk about that a little bit more. So just for those who like a little bit more science, these are the two autonomic systems, if you like, within our body. So we've got the sympathetic system, which, if you like, is the go pedal, the gas pedal. It does help us to tackle stress in a healthy way, as in we get that increased energy, alertness, we get the adrenaline rush, and helps us to respond to those deadlines and those immediate challenges. If you're about to stand up and do a presentation, or you're about to go for a job interview, or, as I say, 4 o'clock court deadline, or something that just needs that boost, that's what that's there for. There's the gas pedal, go. But we can't keep that pedal on all the time. And yet so many people are trying to, and that's what results in, of course, the chronic stress and the burnout and that sort of thing. Because what we're not engaging enough is the parasympathetic system, the brake pedal, if you like. So not only does it actually help us to rest, and the digest system you'll hear mentioned a lot, because we carry a lot of stress in our gut. So when people are running at very high stress levels, you will often notice issues with stomach, say IBS, nauseousness, all sorts of things to do with their digestive system, because the body doesn't have the energy to cope with everything it's trying to do. So one of the first things it slows down is the digestive system. So obviously, if we have the right balance between these two systems, if we're able to apply the brake pedal, then obviously we can rest, we can recover, our food can get digested, our stomach is healthier, we feel calmer and more focused, and it does support that recovery of the system, if you like. When it's been under high pressure for a while, it needs that chance to recover, and overall well-being. Now, just to put a little flag in this, there isn't a lot of time to go into this in a lot of detail tonight, but I'm always happy to talk to anybody more about this, because this is a really fascinating part, why I talk about this specifically for lawyers. Because maybe you know all this, maybe you know the things on that green side, you know about the brake pedal, but you think, but okay, I haven't got time for those things. I know that, I don't know, meditation, yoga, walks in nature, spending time with my friends and family, all these things, sports. I know those things help me to be calmer, to be more focused, to support my well-being, but I don't have time for those. So when we feel all the extra pressure of all the things we should do, all that simply does is push us even further into panic mode and failure mode. So we're trying to put the brake on, but all we're doing is actually speeding up the gas pedal. Sorry about that. There's some screaming going on in the background. I'm sure they will all be fine. So we're trying to do the right things. We're trying to do all the things that maybe we've heard about in webinars and trainings and all these sorts of things, but we try to do them and the body panics. The body goes into, but hang on, if you're not running at 100 miles an hour, if you're not constantly checking your emails and scanning for threats, then all of this might fall down. We might lose everything. We might not be safe. So where we have to be very careful with the nervous system is we have to do things slowly in a way that the body still feels safe. Because otherwise, if we go at this at 100 miles an hour, and this is what I call well-being burnout, we go, oh, I'll take an hour every day for lunch to go to the gym. Wonderful. But if your body is not used to taking even 5 minutes, then that will just throw it into panic. So that's the real balance here, is for people to decide what steps they might want to take. And I've got some suggestions for you, don't worry. It's not a one size fits all. You have to look at where you are right now and what your nervous system feels safe doing and what it feels unsafe doing. Because if we try and push it too far, too fast, it's going to increase stress levels, not reduce them. Even if we're trying to do lovely things like finish work on time or go out with friends or whatever it is, if that feels so unsafe to the body, it's actually going to have the opposite effect for us. So I wanted to introduce you to the stress ladder. You can see part of it on my banner at the side here. I had to move it around because the sun is really bright, which is a lovely problem to have. But I try to use this banner in all my trainings and everything, because it explains why we do the things we do, why other people are doing the things that they're doing. And if you're someone who looks after other people, supports other people, it explains maybe how you can support people as well, what to be on the lookout for. So what I've got at the bottom there is the green zone. This is when our stress levels are low, very low, low stress levels. We're in the green zone. We're calm. We can think clearly. We have that clarity. We're also creative. We can come up with solutions. We can problem solve. We can be compassionate and empathetic to clients, to opponents, even if they're being difficult. We can handle it. You might hear people talk about being in flow. We can handle things that are getting thrown at us. The stress levels might rise a little bit up into that yellow zone, but they'll just dip up there for a minute or so, or how long we need, and then they'll come back down into the green zone. That is, if you like, an elastic nervous system, a healthy nervous system, a regulated nervous system. But as our stress levels keep creeping up, we end up in this yellow zone, which is the fight or flight zone that you might be familiar with. We have adrenaline released first, and when we run out of adrenaline, we start releasing cortisol, the stress hormone. Everything feels urgent. We have these feelings of anxiety and that everything's running really fast. We're very reactive. We can't problem solve very well. We can't think our way out of it because the brain, the thinking part of the brain, is starting to go offline at this point. That's the whole point of the fight or flight response. The body needs to run or fight. It does not need to think. It does not need to communicate or problem solve or empathize with anybody. It doesn't need any of those things. It needs to run or fight. So all the energy goes away from the thinking and problem solving part of the brain. So I don't know if you've ever noticed that when you can feel you're in that high stress. If you're at the lower end of the yellow zone, that's the adrenaline. That's the I've got the agility and the speed to move quickly with something, which we can do for those short bursts of time. But as we get higher and higher up in the yellow zone, that problem solving, that clear thinking starts to switch off because the brain doesn't need clear thinking to survive. It needs to run or fight. And so if we don't learn to manage our stress levels, if we don't learn how to create a healthier, more flexible nervous system, then we just keep rising up through the yellow zone. And that's where most people are, at somewhere in that yellow zone. Some people don't even remember what it feels like to be in the green zone or what they might need to do to get there. And that'll be hopefully one of the big takeaways for people to start thinking about where maybe they are most of the time, because you'll move up and down, but where do you spend most of your time? If we continue to have unmanaged stress, we will move through the yellow zone and eventually potentially hit the red zone. And this is where there is no more energy left anymore. We freeze, we shut down, whether that's a physical shutdown of the body or just more of a shutdown in the mind. Some people are in functional freeze. They may still be turning up to work, but they are more and more distant, more and more disconnected, not involved. It's as if they are a bit vacant. They're not really there. They can't make decisions. They can't really engage in things. And they are, physically and mentally exhausted. And that it's not the definition of burnout in that sense, but that's what severe burnout starts to look like. We are just in that absolute frozen state where all the body is trying to do is survive. So it's just got enough energy to pump the blood around, beat the heart, certainly isn't doing anything with the digestive system. So all sorts of stomach issues and things there. And certainly no engaging with anyone, no decision making being made, all of that sort of thing. So those are the different stages that I would like people to be aware of so that they can notice or start to notice, where is my nervous system at different times during the day or at different times generally. When you're in the green zone, what does that feel like? What do you notice? Do you feel quite clear in that sense of clarity in your head? Do you feel, oh yes, I can come up with solutions to that. I can think of a way around that problem. That person might be being really rude to me, but I understand that it's just because they've got a lot going on for them and I can respond in a calm way to them. Versus, do you find that maybe you're in that yellow zone a lot where perhaps you are angry when someone is short with you or unreasonable with you, because it's harder to regulate our own emotions as we're moving up through that yellow zone. So it's really important to try to understand where we are. And this is where it starts to be super interesting in terms of engaging with other people. So, for example, if I hadn't learned about this, not only would I be struggling for myself, but with my children, with teenagers with ADHD, with them flying off the handle, even I saw in the local shops today, the shop assistant and this customer having a go at each other. And it's so interesting because I could see on this system exactly where each of them was and exactly where each of them was coming from. So this is what I mean when you start to see it as a different language. So if you're trying to speak with someone, whether it's a client, whether it's an opponent, I always find those the most fun, anybody that you're coming into contact with, you can think, it looks as though they've gone into the yellow zone, or maybe they've even gone into freeze. So there's no point trying to have conversations with them at that point because nothing's going in. How do we get them, or give some space and time, and maybe we have to come back to it, to bring everybody as close as we can down into the green zone, or at least into the low yellow zone, so that we can actually have a productive and useful conversation with them. And these things are contagious. So the more time we can learn to spend in the green zone, that is contagious to those people around us. So it helps a calm nervous system helps to calm other people's nervous systems. It's beautifully designed, really, actually. It's very clever. And similarly, if we're up in the yellow zone, high alert, high anxiety feelings all the time, that rubs off on all the people around us as well. So it's just so useful for all the people that we're going to come into contact with. So let's have a look again, not just at the science and at human brains, but looking at it more in the legal context again. So we are very bright, clever individuals. We wouldn't be in this profession if we weren't. And we're usually extremely hardworking, extremely high achieving, and used to putting ourselves into uncomfortable positions, working hard, working long hours, all of those sorts of things. They are sort of the hallmarks, if you like, of us even getting into the profession, and then certainly being successful in it. So being highly functional in a highly stressed state is pretty much the accepted norm within the legal profession. But it's also why we have ridiculously high levels of stress, hugely concerning levels of burnout that haven't even started to touch the sides yet. This is a problem coming down the line faster and faster, but it has not even hit yet. And people leaving and all of these sorts of things, because this survival mode, this sort of barely coping, like white knuckle ride, holding on with the tips of our fingers, starts to feel normal. It starts to feel like a personality trait, like, oh yes, I can, I'm so strong, I'm so resilient, I can cope in all of these things. And maintaining this high performance under all this pressure becomes this mask, if you like, this personality trait, which, yes, let's be honest, over the years, the profession has given that badge of honor to. It has talked about how wonderful it is if people will work all these ridiculous hours and will sacrifice their holidays for the good of the deal or the team or whatever. It's been celebrated. So not only do we tend to have these traits, the hardworking, the people-pleasing, all of those sorts of things, overworking, perfectionism, but we found ourselves in a profession that celebrates them. So it's compounded it and left us in this position where even stopping to take 30 seconds or 5 minutes to pause feels like almost impossible to some people. But what I wanted to point out, and I think I did at the beginning, is that our nervous system doesn't distinguish between a physical danger that we might be in and the brain sense of some danger for us. And any threats to our reputation, to our capability, to our job, to our security, feels like a really, really important threat to the body. And the body registers all that as, this is not safe, I'm not safe. So what do I need to do to feel safe again? So we've got lots of things that, again, compound this in law. There's an urgency, there's a volume, depending, I'm sure, on all the work we do, there's high stakes, whether it's expensive corporate deals or whether it's important family matters and child custody battles, or even just in my little world of property, the business owners or the individual owners can get really emotionally attached to those things, and it feels high stakes to them. There is a constant urgency. There is this in many different branches of law, this still adversarial idea. There is an opponent. I always try to work with mine personally, and I'm a transactional lawyer. I know some litigators do as well. I was a very conciliatory litigator in the early days, so maybe that's why I didn't stay in it. But that was the way I worked. But this perfectionism, this overworking, this competition of how many hours we all worked and all of this sort of thing, and also then ignoring it all, wearing it all as a badge of honor, or ignoring any impact that it's having on us. So this suppression of any emotions about it. We don't talk about the fact we feel fearful that we might let people down, or fearful that we can't keep up with the pace, or guilty that we are spending all this time at work because we're trying to stay in survival mode, but then not spending time with our family, perhaps, as well. So all of these things, it's like a pressure pot just going on there. So what sort of things could we look for, both in ourselves and in other people that we might support, manage, work with, all of that sort of thing? How do we recognise a dysregulated nervous system? So racing thoughts, the inability to switch off. So the thoughts running at 100 miles an hour because they're always on high alert. Inability to switch off because if we switch off, it might not be safe. There could be problems happening and we somehow feel safer if we know about them than if we don't know about them. Feelings of brain fog and forgetfulness, because as stress increases, brain tiredness increases. And then we don't have that clarity of thought and all of that sort of thing. Difficulty prioritizing tasks, because under high stress, everything is urgent. It's very difficult to look at different tasks and say, actually, that's the thing I really need to do today, because everything feels like an emergency. Everything feels urgent when we're under high stress. We catastrophize, we overanalyze things. We might be working later and later. This is why overwork, again, and perfectionism, for example, are protective traits. They are trauma responses, stress responses. We're overworking because we're trying to make sure that we haven't missed anything. We're terrified that we're not doing enough, or we're not good enough, or we're not as good as the next person, etc. Checking emails compulsively, I've mentioned. Procrastinating over things because we don't trust our judgment anymore. Self-esteem goes down, self-confidence goes down. We just don't trust ourselves. In my sort of work in transactional property, it's all about risk assessments. Is this clause all right? Can we accept this? Do I need to tell the client about this? Do we need to make a decision on this? Etc., etc. It's all risk assessments. It's all decisions. But when you can't make those decisions, when your brain doesn't have the energy and the power to make those decisions, you're procrastinating, you're stuck, you're frozen. You start to withdraw from anything that might have been helpful for you. Maybe you used to be the life and soul of the party. You would be at all the team events or all the client events. Maybe you start to not go to those. Maybe you even start to withdraw from friends, from family, because we just don't have the energy to put into those relationships anymore. Irritable and snapping at other people. Often that starts with the people closest to us at home, because somehow it feels safer to snap at them, so they get the worst of us. When we're in that, moving into that freeze zone, that feeling numb, detaching away from other people, we feel these feelings of overwhelm, feelings of anxiety, and yes, far more emotional fragility that, of course, we then don't want to admit to anyone, but we feel as though we're completely failing by having those things. So physical signs as well, that physical exhaustion, sleep disruption. So my telltale sign is always waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and running over things. That's my stress response. Shallow breathing. So breathing only in this top part of the chest, not ever breathing all the way down into our stomach. Because again, when we're in the rest and restore mode of the body, we breathe all the way down to the bottom. Whereas when we're in the panic, fight or flight response, we're just rapidly breathing at the top. So that's shallow breathing. And then a part of that can result in that tight chest, that feeling of sort of panic attack type feeling as well. And yes, headaches, muscle tensions, neck, shoulder, back problems, digestive issues, all those sorts of things, and far more. So that's just a snippet, if you like, of what an dysregulated or feeling unsafe nervous system looks like. And I wanted to point this out because I think this is something that gets missed a lot of the time, and that's this high performer paradox. So I've been in the wellbeing in law world for, as I say, 10 years now. And I think there has been this misconception, this myth, if you like, that wellbeing is fluffy and resilience is for those people who can't cope and all these sorts of things. But what I keep trying to talk about is that it's our highest performers that are really the people that we need to watch here. The people who are hitting all the deadlines, appearing really calm and capable, looks after everyone, is the safe pair of hands, always says yes to pick up those really difficult clients, bills really well, records loads of hours, etc., etc. But what Why are they feeling the need to go above and beyond all the time? Now, it's all personal to the individual. It all depends on far more circumstances than just these things. These things could mean that they are absolutely flying, that they have got a very regulated and safe nervous system, that they can do all these things quite safely. But in quite a lot of cases, their nervous system could very well be going into overload. Their ability to recover starts to shrink, because to be able to keep running and to keep up these expectations that they know everybody has of them starts to take away any time that they might have had for rest and recovery. Their personal resilience does start to reduce. And this is impacted as well by our age, our hormones, depending on whether obviously we're women as well or not, and what is really going on in life. Because we might be lawyers, but we don't leave who we are when we come and sit down to do the work. We don't leave our lives and everything else that's going on at the door. And I know historically we may have thought that was the case, but we don't. If we are grieving, if we are a carer for somebody, if we are going through that very common sandwich generation now, where we've got younger children and we've got parents that we're trying to look after or we're worried about, all of that comes to work with us, even if we don't tell anyone and even if nobody else knows. That resilience is being chipped away at all the time. So it's the high performers, our best people, who are the best at hiding this, because they probably have done for years and years and years. So just to give you some examples, because I know when I first put this session together, I was asked to give some specific examples as well. So in this situation, we've got a senior lawyer who came to me saying they felt like they were failing and they felt like their confidence was going down and down and down. Despite, great CV, great job, everything they were telling me about what people were saying to them at work, all super positive. This was a superstar. But they didn't feel it. They felt exhausted. They felt that, the wheels were about to come off at any time. So what they're experiencing is this chronic stress levels, nervous system overload, because they're so high up in the yellow, touching on the red, that the body doesn't get any chance to rest and restore. It doesn't even remember how to get down into the green, because it's been, with one of my clients, it's been possibly 20 or 30 years when she started working with me, since she was maybe in that zone. So years and years of hypervigilance and threat scanning, and yet at work being told how wonderful they were. So the body goes, oh, so this works then. It's exhausting, but this is good. This is keeping me safe. This is working. But it's not working forever. And people start to realize, they might not realize what's wrong. They might not know what they need to do about it, but they start to realize when something is not working anymore. So the change is recognizing the early warning signs. What is it? Is it that irritability? Is it sleeping less and less at night? Is it realizing that your memory is just getting worse, or little mistakes or little near misses are creeping in, or irritability with people when you're usually the nicest person in the room? So what are your early warning signs? Because we all have our own. And then it was about building in, now, what I've called micro recovery moments. This is not about saying, take half an hour for your lunch, take an hour for your lunch, stop checking your emails at 5 or 6 o'clock, log off. No, because that would have pushed this person's nervous system into complete panic if they'd have tried to do it at all. They either wouldn't have tried to do it, or they would have tried because they really wanted it to change, but it would have broken them. So micro is about, where does my body feel safe now? So let me use emails or logging off as an example. You presumably, or probably, have a time in the evening or in the day where you generally stop checking emails or messages. For some people, this might be 5 o'clock. It might be 6 o'clock. For some people, this might be 11 o'clock. Depends where you work, depends what you do, all of that sort of thing. So I'm not talking about a specific time here. I'm talking about what time you, at the moment, stop checking. And how we change this is that we just start slowly. So we might bring it, if it is 11 o'clock usually, we might bring it to 10:30 for a week or 2 weeks. Or if it's normally 7 or 8 o'clock at night, we might bring it just a little bit further. Now, what's really interesting is after about 2 weeks, suddenly the body realizes it's safe and you jump huge amounts of time. But that first jump is the hardest. It's the hardest to do. And that's why I always say to people, see what feels safe already. And it's similar with these micro recovery moments. If you're someone who already takes half an hour at lunchtime, wonderful, don't stop doing it. But we need to maybe add in some more. If you're someone who thinks there's no way I could take half an hour at lunchtime, could we take 5 minutes at first? Could we literally walk outside, take a few breaths of air and walk back in again? I'm going to talk a little bit more about micro recovery moments, but that's what I mean by it. I mean something small and safe so it doesn't push us over the edge. Reducing internal threat language. So hopefully even listening to what we're talking about here today means that when you start to maybe experience some of those feelings or hear some of those voices around, I must reply to that client within 10 minutes. And then you might stop and think, hang on, my system or my brain or whatever is saying that I should, why? What do I think is going to happen? Do I really think that client is going to make a complaint and therefore I'll lose my job, or that client is going to take all their work away and I'll never have that client's work and I'll never have any clients work? It's actually taking those thought processes to their natural end, if that makes sense. Because once we've done that, which I know we're not going to do with every thought all day long, we don't have the time for that. But once we take it to that and we see it for the ridiculousness, if you like, that it is, it can start to change. It can start to shift. And then setting boundaries. That's, as I mentioned, about even the micro changes. Don't try and set big, huge boundaries now. Set ones that feel just outside comfortable. And then we start to increase them after a while. So what happens then? Self-confidence, confidence improves, self-esteem, performance, of course, goes up once someone can spend more of their time in that green zone and less of the time in the yellow and red zone. And what's always beautiful about this work is, within a year, in most cases, certainly within a year or 2 years, people are often in a different place than they were before. Maybe they do step into more of a leadership role. Maybe they are taking on other responsibilities or getting involved in other things. It's almost as if this point that felt like breaking point was the threshold. It was the precipice, and it felt like disaster. And that's why, when people come to me with these things, I do have to, I obviously listen to them, and it's about calming their nervous system. That's what I help do. But then I'll smile and I'll say, I'm smiling because I know it feels awful now, but I can see what's on the other side. And it's really exciting. So I hope that gives people hope as well. It's amazing work to do this. So once we can come out of survival mode, then everything improves. Our health improves, our sleep improves, our relationships improve, our performance improves, our enjoyment, motivation, everything improves. So some tools, some things to try. So I've got this pause tool. So the psychological pause. This is just a way of saying to the body, I'm not under threat right now. And these are the sorts of things that you may well have been to trainings where they talk about it and you think, that sounds lovely, I'm never going to make time for that. Why do you think I spent all my time talking about what happens when we're in the fight or flight response? What's going wrong in our careers and our relationships and why everything is so difficult for us? Before I came on to, you could try some of these things, because now hopefully your nervous system has gone, I could do with something like that. What would be the easiest thing for me to do? And that's what I would love people to take away, is just something that they think, do you know what? I think I could do that quite easily, because then the nervous system can exhale and can say, that's okay, we can do that. So some suggestions here, just planting your feet flat on the floor. That's one example. Just doing it sort of noticeably, intentionally. You've just taken a few seconds to come out of whatever panic mode or worry mode or whatever you're in, just to put your feet on the floor. You might tighten your jaw and then unclench it. And I say tighten it just so that we actually know if we're tight or unclenched. Sometimes we don't know. Like we can be living with our shoulders up all the time. So that's why I say raise your shoulders, drop your shoulders, clench your jaw, unclench your jaw, so that we can feel the tight and we can feel the release. Lengthen your exhale. This is one of my favorites because it really physically reboots the nervous system. So you breathe in and then you breathe out, but you let your exhale be longer than your inhale. So you might want to count. If you're someone who's had panic attacks or that sort of thing before, counting breath doesn't always work for you. It doesn't work brilliantly for me. But you just breathe in and have an exhale that is a bit longer. And you might do that once, you might do it 2 or 3 times, but that resets the nervous system. And for those of you, I know understanding the science always got me to believe in these things and to do these things. The science of this is actually quite simple. If you're in high alert and fight or flight mode, you're just running or fighting to survive. You're not stopping to think, I'm just going to put my feet on the floor. I'm just going to raise my shoulders and let them down. I'm just going to breathe out. So what we're doing with any of those things, it could be you stare out the window for a few seconds. It could be that you drink a glass of water really slowly. It doesn't matter what the thing is. The thing is a signal to your body that you are not under threat for your life, because you can pause for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And the more we can do this, the more the body can understand that we're safe and it doesn't need to be in panic mode. You might have a go at some of that internal language. So you might start to feel the, you might get, let's use my example, you get the email, contact me urgently. Your sister, the hairs go up on the back of your neck, your blood runs cold, you can feel your blood running around your body really quickly. It starts to go from your decision-making part of your brain. You can feel all that switching off. That was just what happened to me. But when we can take that pause, maybe we plant our feet on the floor, maybe we look up, we just do something to interrupt the pattern. And then maybe internally we realize, okay, I've gone into panic mode. My brain, my nervous system, whatever you want to say. One of my clients calls it the little man inside her head. Little man inside my head thinks I'm under threat. What are they worried about? What do they think is going to happen? Is that really likely to happen? Probably not. Okay. So do I need to react immediately in panic, or can I take a pause and decide how to react? So again, it's seconds or a minute or two, whatever it is, but it's that space that allows the system to calm again and the body to understand that it's not under threat all the time. So slowing the pace as well. Pause before replying to things. If we reply in fight or flight energy, it's probably not going to be super helpful. So maybe we need to take that pause. Maybe we need to do one of these things first, or if we can, leave a bit of time before we send it. Some examples, you might sip some water. You might just, make a couple of notes, or as I say, turn and look out the window, do some star jumps. I don't mind what you do. Create some space. Avoid, if you can, responding from that fight or flight place where you can feel that your nervous system has just shot up. Maybe we do something quickly to just bring it down again. So again, just a couple of other ideas that you could try. If you start to notice any of these feelings, do you notice your shoulders have gone up, that you've tensed? Do you notice that you're feeling hotter? Your chest has got tighter, you're breathing more shallowly, you're feeling more disordered, you just can't catch your thoughts. That's a sign that you're going up those stress levels. And then this is important. We don't want to spend all day doing it. We're not going to spend all day doing it. But in the moments you can, what is the story that is going on? What is the reason my brain is panicking over this? Does it think that I'll look stupid? I'll look like a failure? I'll let people down? And then what would that mean? We don't need to do this all the time. The brain gets faster once we start looking for it. But starting to understand where it's coming from is more than half the battle in letting go of that and changing the story. And then what would help me feel just a tiny bit safer? We're not going for perfection. We're not going for an hour a day or even half an hour a day. We're going for what would feel safe just now. Is it 5 minutes of something? Is it 10 minutes of something? What feels safe right now? Yes, I will be sharing the recording with you and the slides. So, yeah, you don't need to worry about remembering all of this at all. So Again, the old story was that if we were struggling with stress, if we were close to burning out, if we weren't able to think as rationally or as fast as we know we could in the past, then we were failing somehow. We were weak. We weren't cut out for this profession. You know, those were the things I was hearing 10 years ago. When I first started talking about stress to lawyers, oh my goodness, even my business coach at the time said, you will never sell stress to lawyers, because they'll either say, we don't have that problem here, or if we have stress lawyers, this career isn't for them. I know there are some places that may still believe that, but there's a lot less now. It is not weakness. This is about protecting our nervous system, strengthening our nervous system to give us real resilience, clear thinking, great communication, really good judgment, and presence. You know, whether we're leaders in name or whether people just follow us because we're a good role model at whatever level we're at. Those are all the sorts of things that improve as well. And this is a topic I will talk about a lot. It's about long-term sustainability. This is about, can we stay in this career, if we want to, for 20, 30, 40 plus years, if that's what we want? Or do we feel that we need to leave because we can't stay in it? And that breaks my heart, because I know how damn hard we all worked to get into it. And the fact that we feel we can't do it anymore really, you know, as I say, it is something I want to change. This is about long-term sustainability. And so what we need is not big gestures, small things, little micro recovery moments during the day. As I say, gave you lots of suggestions there. I should run a competition for the most strange or brilliant suggestion. It might be playing your favorite song. Whatever it is, it does not matter what the thing is. It's having that micro pause where the brain can just reset. Having some boundaries around your availability. Start with what feels safe, and then we build up from there. Reducing constant stimulation. Don't forget, this is why the general population, as well as us lawyers, have much higher stress levels, because of connectivity, the pings, the bings, the phone going, the internet going, Teams, WhatsApp, Slack. You know, we are got at from every single direction. So again, if you're someone who always has your phone with you, ask yourself, is that because feeling that I can constantly be contacted makes me feel safe? Because if people couldn't get hold of me even for 10 minutes, does my brain think disaster, etc.? Which we know is not true. It's a nervous system response. So as an example, could we start going longer periods without checking every 2 minutes, phone messages, emails, those sorts of things? Going longer between checking them is, again, a way that makes us feel safer, that we do not have to be constantly on. Sleep consistency. So going to bed at a similar time, waking up at a similar time, doing things you know work for you to help you have better sleep. Moving a little bit, all these things help. And this is not about, as I say, big gestures and big changes. It's little tiny things that take seconds or minutes. Recognizing your signature, your stress signature, your nervous system overload. What changes for you as you move from the green into the yellow and up the yellow? What is happening? What do you notice in your body? What do you notice in the way that you are interacting with people? And it's also learning not to override everything that your nervous system needs. And for some, this is going to be really hard because they've been doing it for 20 or 30 plus years. This is about stopping to listen to what the nervous system is telling us, because it's so clever. It is so clever. It tries so hard to tell us, with the headaches, with the tension in our back and neck, with the stomach aches, with the waking up at night. It tries and tries to tell us that something isn't working, and we ignore it all until it gets really serious. So it's learning to listen and learning to just take those micro steps that help to support it as well. And don't worry, once you get used to taking the micro steps, you start taking really big steps because you've made it safe by then. But we've got to start small. Reframing, I don't have time. I hope I've made a good case for making a few seconds every so often. But where we constantly override everything, where we constantly overload ourselves, everything takes more energy. Everything is harder. We have less mental energy, less cognitive ability. Everything takes longer, and we're probably producing a substandard product. And perfectionists hate that idea. Concentration reduces, memory reduces, emotional reactions, as in being irritable or excessive. There's nothing wrong with being tearful, by the way. I love a good cry, as my children laugh at me all the time. But overly susceptible to emotions, and our performance drops and drops. So in reality, this is not just another thing to do on our list. This is about making our list much easier to tackle. And maybe some of those things will even come off the list as we have more self-confidence, more self-esteem. We may start saying no to some things or delegating them to other people. So this is how we function really well for as long as we want to. This is the basis, this is the foundation. So yeah, I've said there, nervous system regulation is the engine behind our focus, great leadership, real resilience, not the sort that sometimes you have in training, but real resilience and that real sustainable performance. So I think I've made this point, but just as a reminder, start small. Do not try anything big. Please don't. Start with really small, manageable, that feels safe or just over safe, just a tiny bit edgy, but still safe enough to do. We've got to have that awareness of where our nervous system is and what feels safe and what feels like a stress. So notice your stress patterns. Notice where you are at any given time on that ladder of stress. What are your early warning signs? What's one recovery habit that you could do? Is it look out the window between each phone call, or a star jump, or a glass of water, whatever it is? Pause before reacting, especially if you notice a more emotional reaction, whether it's frustration, fear, upset, anxiety, anger. That emotion is a flag. That's why I love emotions. I love all emotions. They're trying to tell us something. They're a flag. What are they trying to tell us? Before I react, just take a minute to think what that's about and allow support, whether that's support from other people, whether that's support for your nervous system. Allow that earlier. It doesn't have to all collapse before we can accept that we don't know everything, and we can get some support with this. So final thoughts. Our nervous system is not the enemy. In fact, it's so clever. It's so trying to support us, but the high alert survival mode that we've all worked in for 10, 15, 20 plus years is a learned response to the environments that we work in, the nature of the work we do, what actually got us into the profession in the first place and got us promoted. So it's natural in a lot of ways, but it's not gonna, I love that the title of that book, What Got Us Here, is not gonna get us there. It might have got us here, but it's not good enough to get us to the future as well. So we're not trying to lower our standards. We're not trying to be less ambitious. We're not trying to care less about what happens with our work or our career. We want to have high standards, excellence, being amazing at what we do, but sustainable for the long term, and protecting our cognitive load, our mental capacity, our wonderful creative ways of working and problem solving, and supporting other people as well. So it's about building this way of working and living that our nervous system can sustain for the long term by helping our system understand that it's not in danger, it is safe. And all of these little sort of tips, tricks and tools that I've mentioned can help with that as well. But as I say, do not try and do all of them. Pick one or two maybe to start off with. So thank you all so much for your time today. I'm very happy to stay and do some questions in the chat. I'm very happy to obviously share the slides, the recording, and if anybody has any questions after that, do just send me an email back again as well. And I hope that there's been something that is useful there for you. I do really appreciate everybody coming along to learn something about their nervous system. So thank you all so much.